and of course Haile Gerima. Thank you.
Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming in and watching the film with us and honoring Haile. This is really
He's a black German.
yes, and actually coming here to celebrate TEZA, for us to take a look at the Black German experience. Abiy here to speak about this. I first became aware of that while we were on the set. Araba would mention some of the things that were going on in Germany, and it was really the first time. I mean, I have relatives that live in Germany, but that was the first time that I could really come close to the issues that she was facing and other black Germans were facing in Germany, and came to understand it. And I guess, take it away.
Yes, I can only join and thank you all for coming as well. I don't know where to start. I've been saying that every time I see TEZA, it always seems like a different version because it's so multi-layered, and there's always other things that are more in the foreground, or I feel like this wasn't there before. It's almost like it wasn't there before, but it's very multi-layered. So I would also love to hear what you saw, because people see so many different aspects, and something that working, like having the honor to work with Haile was to really be instilled that our story matters, and it matters to be told in connection also with how the diaspora and the continent story are intertwined, even in this complex chapter of Ethiopian history. And there's so much that comes together that is very hard to know where to start. Even though it's a very distinct history, it's also a history in which I have found myself very much in. So I also say that I didn't act, I really felt the story. I felt that I was impersonating Cassandra. I didn't have to act a single part of it because it was really what I felt. And also intergenerationally, my father is part of the generation of African students who came to Europe, in my case from Ghana, but also with this mission to return to build a liberated Africa. So it's a different story, but there's so much that comes together on so many different levels. And every time I see that, so I'm still, I just saw it again, so I'm still in TEZA. I'm not very fast, so I'm still kind of arriving back to you as well. And also the dedication of the film to everyone who was beaten and killed just for being black. I remember, I think, Ashali, you once talked about how many people have been killed in this whole process, black people in Germany, who have been killed in this whole process of making the film. And in my case, I was born and raised in Austria, but we are very much connected to the Black German story. And the issue of police brutality, anti-Black racism is a global issue. So we also have been struggling with that and against that as well. So for now, I think this is what I will say for now.
Just wanted to also ask Haile to say a few words about what Araba, Araba said about the Black German experience. And actually, you did mention a couple of things while you were making the film and we were there. You had mentioned a couple of instances that you're aware of, even Ethiopians that experienced this, and that the story of TEZA is literally the story of a lot of people and their experiences, both in Ethiopia and in Germany.
Yeah, when the East German wall came down, actually it was ushered by a killing of an African, I think it's from Sudan or I don't know, but that's one, for example. And this is as I was platforming the pre-production of the film. It was a current event, a reoccurring event. Even to a point where my co-producers, the German co-producers, would send me a newspaper clip before we even start shooting because it was parallel, it was in parallel to the story I was trying to tell. And I remember a few weeks before we went to shoot, I think for Ethiopia or I think Cologne. Before we went to shoot in Germany, an Ethiopian guy was beat to literally to pulp. And it was something I cannot ignore because I'm saying here, I'm trying to make a movie, a story, and African people are being killed, and also for me, the blaming of skinheads is usually what I didn't buy. That's why I made, even the German co-producers were worried. I just made a random German, not shaved, the usual stereotype, but just this young Germans, anytime could flare up in the way, and by the way, the film script was written to be shot in America. The German part was in the US. So all the story you see that was platformed in Germany, because the US is not interested in African cinema, I was able to hook up with co-production partners. And then the next thing was, how do we stage it in Germany? And I told them, easy. And I start to rewrite the script to fit the German location. Because it did happen in the US. An Ethiopian guy in Oregon was beat with both baseball hit, and killed, and the son still lives somewhere. I know the story, the history was in the news. And so it initially was written for America. And I don't want people to locate, finger pointing, it happens only there. To me, this white supremacy has completely, I would say warped the mindset of white people. It's very hard for white people to remain, in a normal zone, because there's always something. It could be guilt, it could be just supremacist arrogance. It flares up, and usually we don't know when it flares up. And we can stage it distant to the African American experience, and most Ethiopians especially, I do not know how many Ethiopians died who came to school to America during the emperor. I know cases in Michigan, where an Ethiopian guy was hanged and killed. So that is really what I was able to amass to not going to go to school abroad only idea and taking science and modernization, but the journey itself is a horrific journey of loneliness and also hostility and doubt etc. So all of it was just hitting me left and right. I know I'm talking all over the place. In fact, I wanted to hear you guys really.
One thing actually I wanted to encourage Araba to talk about was while we were filming, I don't know if you remember, we were at the university where we were filming in the laboratories, and we would take our lunch in that common area, and you were telling me how you started an organization, and you actually were the president, I think, of the organization that of Black Germans, Austrian Germans, yeah. And you were trying to, kind of familiarizing me with some of the things that you were trying to do. How did what you were doing in the film how did that experience prepare you for the film? Because I know Haile, when he cast you, you told him your life, and he said, well, no? Okay.
No, actually, the two of them, the casting is very important for people to know. One, I've been looking for Cassandra all over Germany, even from France, Paris, to cast, a person who's aware of the issue I was after. And I did talk to a lot of Black German organization in Cologne, Frankfurt, etc., etc. But one time, somebody showed me a magazine where Araba is in the distance in this still photography, a magazine, and I looked and I said, she could be her. And then I asked them to help me contact her in Austria. Is that? Yes. Yeah. And then she sent me a tape. And the tape, she's actually on television debating white people on this issue. And I knew it was her. And this guy here, the same thing, I mentioned that to let you know. This guy was here, and there was a meeting of Ethiopian book being discussed about the Ethiopian royal family and the history of marriage and politics in the Ethiopian empire. And I was in the back, very, very far, and he was somewhere in the middle here, where you guys are, maybe third row. And I said, the royal family, they're arrogant. They just intermarry with each other. They don't think of other Ethiopians as attractive and normal. I went off on him on this issue. So he snapped and turned, and he kept saying, it's people like you who created the crisis. Some shit like that. Ethiopian problem is people like you. And I'm like looking at him, and I said, he could be Tesfaye. I could have cast him for that. I wasn't interested in terms of what he was saying. It went over my head. It didn't faze me. But I said, this is a guy I want. And then I couldn't see him again, and I'm in Ethiopia in trouble. And then I asked Yamane, a mutual friend, to locate him. And that's how he was flown to the shooting. He came late, but I knew he would fit in the way he snapped at me. So they're very, this is like when you get lucky with actors, you get the aura first. It's not necessarily anything else other people in Hollywood had attached to it. It's the aura of the person, the spirit of the person. And that's how the two of them got into the film. Otherwise, I've met a lot of Black German sisters who are actors in the industry, but I was not interested in just actors. I wanted some vibration, spiritual vibration from the individuals. And this is why they carry the film good, the two of them, in my view. I was very fortunate to have them and all of the cast, for me that I got. I was able to put together. The guy who played the minister still scares the hell out of me.
I wanted to actually kind of touch on what you just said about casting, because I had no acting experience. I don't know if Araba did, and the minister had no acting experience. I don't know if you know this.
No, I didn't, yeah.
The day he was supposed to shoot we were upstairs in the room, and he came to me and he said, "I am so nervous. I don't know what to do. I don't know. I've never. What's going to happen? Why can't you tell me?" I said, "Look, this is what you do." And the only thing I really, I said, just be very deliberate when you're walking around and everything. And then when you pour the tea. When you pour the tea, lift the thing like this and bring it down like that, because I said that's really intimidating, when you do stuff like that. And I was looking at it, and there was a lot of water, sound of water. And then when he was pouring it, I noticed just today. I've seen this film maybe, I don't know, 20 times. I just noticed the thing that that there was also that water when it was pouring. All to say, Haile, no experienced actors, but how do you bring out, because I don't think it's my talent. I'm pretty sure Araba is pretty talented, but and the minister as well, and a lot of the other people who are acting. I remember the one thing you did with me at the hotel, which was my first scene, when you came and told me something personal, because I needed to be really sad and to evoke sadness. I don't know if you remember what you told me. You told me about an unknown being far away from him. Yeah. But anyway, so how do you get that from your actors? Because it's amazing.
Well, first you have to trust the actors have it, and for me, I have a lot of respect because I come from, my father's culture of theater, and to me, I think the first spiritual leaders were actors. In the tribal communal planet, the actors were the spiritual leaders. They're the inspired forecasters of many things. So in all the rituals in any traditional society, actors began storytelling, because initially it was, now it's become entertaining storytelling, but this was it had a different calling. So actors, I respect actors. Once you cast right, and if you cast wrong, you pay for it. But when you cast right, it is because they have the first departing point, which I call the aura. And the other thing is that I'm not fascinated by actors, because I come from acting myself, and it's demystified for me. The thing about it is sometimes acting uniforms and kills the unique character of individuals. And therefore, I sometimes go for non-actors. Even in Bush Mama, non-actors is what I have. In a lot of the part in many of the films I did, I can get it. Like in Ashes and Embers, I had an actor that carried it. It's an actor I believed in, because I knew him when I first came to America. So I wrote for him or this other guy to play, but the other guy was corrupted by Hollywood, and every time I met him, he was a destabilized spirit because of stardom and attention. This other one was not. So I chose the one that I don't have, the one that could not bring economic benefit by name. That's usually how actors, selected by name, they bring the bank, the box office, etc. That's not my criteria. My criteria is, can these people help me? Can this person, individual, his and her aura, can she help me tell a story? And so it's a partnership arrangement. And then when I get mad, I kind of don't even work with them. I leave them to just shoot around them, and sometimes assign people. Could you work with this guy? Because I can't get nothing out of this person, or something like that. It has happened a few times, but it's something I've learned. I'm even out of my friends in LA in the filmmaking school. Whenever my friends are in trouble for casting somebody they loved, because of love, one guy cast his girlfriend, and he's in trouble. The film is in trouble. So I told him, cut her around. Cut the film and cut her as much as you can. You have other good actors, make her almost non-existent, and then the story will come out. So I've learned about how to demystify, actors who actually are not, let's say, looking for something like you. And for me, I know Araba was searching. She was searching. How do you fight this thing? It's a life she lived, and I was very to me aware of her soul, her spirit, because I also knew this young girl who remained. Now I can't find her anymore, but every time I went to Germany in the 1970 late, when I did Harvest 3,000 Years, I was a lot in Berlin with Ashes and Embers, Bush Mama, and there was this young sister who was mixed with the Cameroonian father, and she was always there from her I met her when she was 13 or 14. She's always in the audience looking at me and crying. And then we started to communicate. And that's what the Cassandra character's seed, the cell seed, comes from that girl's spirit. She kept, she would talk to me after the people gone. She would sit down. She tells me her father is gone and she's alone in this racist country. She's very cold in Germany from racism, etc. So anyway, I don't know if this gives you the thing, but for me, acting is not about, about an individual by his or herself gyrating. It's the relationship you can create between people. And the way you cast them is, I think, the first battle is casting. If you get in the casting the right aura, then you have locked in. But it's not always successful. Sometimes it backfires.
So, Araba, I wanted to ask, TEZA came out almost 18 years ago. In your life, have you personally, as well as in Germany or in Austria where you live, has there been a lot of change? I'm pretty sure TEZA is, there are other films that have made impact. Have you noticed any changes?
So when you say changes in
society?
Oh, that's a big one. I'm going to come to your question, but I also wanted to also bridge it to something that Haile you said about the process, and that's something that because I know that it also wasn't easy to work with me, because I was very invested in the story and I would discuss with you back and forth, because I was not an actress. For me, it was important how the story goes. And I remember, for me, it was very hard to accept that Cassandra didn't keep the baby. And I remember discussing with you that, why can't she keep the baby? And what you understood my yearning for a story. You understood what it was about, because I didn't look at it just as a role. It was really as the story. And I think I've said that a few times. I was very insecure if I could even take the role, because I'm not an actress. And it was such a struggle in Germany for Black actresses to actually have the opportunity for a role that is multi-layered, that is a powerful role. So who am I as a non-actress to just, take that? But then I feel it really came to me. I did not come to it. And I remember the tapes that I sent you, the interviews, your comment was that you're so angry, and you said it in a positive way, like that is something powerful. And there was a way in which till today, I find the way you captured the experience was something. I was actually afraid. I think I told you that. I was afraid to read the script, because I was afraid to be disappointed, because I thought my expectations are so high. We don't have any films that represent our experience, or not enough. And I found it, and I still find it powerful. There's so many levels in the film. Also, when Theodros talks about fighting with poetry and being Pushkin, poetry has been and still has such an important role in our struggle as well. There's, for example, Maya Yim, one of the most known Afro-German poets. the book is actually also here. It was published by Red Sea Press. And it's also important that it wasn't published by Red Sea Press because Red Sea Press found that this is a book that matters to be published as well. And this has been reflected through music, this has been reflected through poetry, and still today, in the beginning I also said that there is sadly also a long list of names of people that we have lost, and poetry has always been the space in which we were able to find comfort, and it was always a tool of resistance in multi-level ways, and that still continues. So until today, I'm very moved how you were able to connect to this struggle and connect the struggles also together, and also add the resistance, the perspective of resistance, how we also have been resisting. And to your question of what has changed, I mean, I myself, I'm a time traveler. I lived here for more than 10 years, and I'm only back in Austria since 3 years, so I'm still kind of arriving in the present, and I'm still finding out. What I do see is a whole new generation with a different sense of self. And what I also saw I was still staying in the States, but in 2020, when there were the worldwide protests after the murder of George Floyd, Vienna saw one of the largest protests organized by young Black people in Europe. So that was a whole new generation of activists as well. But at the same time, what I feel like as becoming a baby elder is also the responsibility of there is also a gap, kind of. When we were protesting in the 90s, we didn't know what happened before. So that's something that is like the reinventing of the wheel and what happens to our stories, In our case, they were erased by what was then the biggest police raid in the Second Republic of Austria. So it was a protest that was criminalized with a very common script that's quite global. So it wasn't anything special. So, and when you said like the movement was created, it was definitely, I was part of a movement, but I was also stepping in the footsteps of my father and the generation before us. So I'm still finding out all that has changed and also all that has not changed. Because it's also a time in which a lot of topics are also appropriated in a way. I know museums want to decolonize from 8 to 12 in the afternoon, like as a buzzword. That was not something that was talkable before. Now it's talkable, but what happens with it is another, it's another issue and question. And I know there's a lot of talk also of the rise of the far right, but racism has always been very well integrated in the middle of society, and that's also what you show in your film, Haile, that it wasn't just the skinheads, it was really in the middle of society. And so, but I'm very impressed, I have to say, of this new generation and their confidence and what they are creating.
One thing I want to say, I don't want the young people, especially their young film students here, I don't want them to think, what I saw in the two of you is range. That's the guarantee to me for the director or storyteller. Looking at actors, range is important. So it's it's the peaks of those that I'm quick to see them. That's what I could bring. The range is also what makes me trust, not one aspect of it. So that's what I noticed in both of you. I just want you to know that. And it doesn't have to come out of training and acting, etc. It can be natural gift, and in the end it's a storytelling, using our audio visual spirit to tell a story. Sorry, I just thought I should say that. I don't want Bumnet and people to misunderstand. She's a cartilage here. I don't want them to think they just take one note out of an actor, single note. Oh no, it's a range.
we want to open the discussion to any questions or any discussion that audience might have, any ideas.
Okay. Hi. Hi, guys. Salam. Sorry. So. One second. All right. Check. Cool. All right. First of all, wonderful movie. I feel like everyone agrees. Maybe a round of applause again. Yeah. Thank you. I feel like my first and very important question is we see one of the two like main actors, and them being in Germany, and then them being excited to come back home after the regime has fallen, and them having this intense hope, I want to call it, of an interest in wanting to change their country, trying to make a difference, feeling like something can change. And I feel like as young people ourselves right now, it's very easy to juxtapose ourselves from them wanting to make a change and wanting to make a difference, and then how it eventually ended up for them. And for us now, when we see this movie, what do you think is our takeaway supposed to be? Is this supposed to be kind of a warning of how we might not be able to, or how we should not go about this? Or is this kind of like a blueprint on sometimes on what not to do, and in a way not to lose hope in effectuating change? I feel like that's my question. Yeah. Cool.
It's a story, and it's a generation story. And then every generation has to see the past and then go forward and not be afraid to go forward, and making mistakes again, and all over, some of them repeating mistakes, which is tragic, but it happens. So for me, I'm testifying for my generation. This is, I would say, a generation, miseducated generation, generation that know little about its own history, much more its own people. So if there's any lesson, do you know your people? Do you know what is the country? What does country mean to you? What does home mean to you, etc.? So to me, this generation, in my view, is dislocated by miseducation, not knowing oneself. Miseducation also is not just education, because there's also parental information, generational information. Did the generation before us, coming out of the Italian War, did they pass to us survival kits? Did they pass to us who we are? Did they pass to us who they were? In my view, no. In my view, that period, as far as I am concerned, ended up with a bunch of Ethiopian kids who want to cure or prescribe social prescription without the necessary equipment. And that's, I think, the tragedy of my generation. Is that a lesson to you? And what do you get? The generation has to forge meaning out of that. Because sometimes it's also your fathers and your mothers who were in the Ethiopian generation of I would say, the IHAPA generation. You are the children of the EPRP, Mason, you are all different forces, political forces of that period. Some of us are children of the Derg, the military Derg. Some of us are the royalist children who want to bring back the royal, the empire back again, etc. So that's what you guys are. And then what do you make out of it? And I'm in my view, you know Amharic?
Yeah, I do.
Ishi. لأن هي فيلم إنني أيتك أتانو. This is a cultural thing for me. I grew up with the philosophy of إنني أيتك أتا. My mother would say it, my grandmother would say it, my father would say it, إنني أيتك أتا. Learn from my punishment. Okay? And it's now the punishment could be heavy duty for modern Western raised kids. But for me, it's as harsh as that, and it's real. Okay, so, but I wouldn't want it to be taken as a blueprint. It's a confession. You take what you can. I think if you're a filmmaker, it's good to know, nuances, rituals. For example, many Ethiopians take liberty to talk about tabal. For me, tabal is not just water. It's what's the meaning of that within that society. Every society has a meaning for water, rain, fire, etc. This metaphors are very important if you're a young storyteller to understand, study from your own people, not just starting from Western concept, because that's part of what we were in trouble. We were falsely modernized, my generation, under the emperor, falsely modernized. All we had to do was throw English here and there, and you get a girlfriend or a friend to go eat food with you. And that is the culture we come from. English was a driver's license, or what would you make it, like a living license. The more you through English, the better you moved vertically. And those things are my generation's property. And I was, in many levels, that's what I was working from. And it's not biographical, but it's a biographical for my generation, I think, because a lot of us who came from different parts went to the United States. We were in the Ethiopian student movement. I think a glimpse of the different part of it speaks for that generation. And some could also say, oh, no, that's too petty bourgeois. We know film is, in fact, what is film anyway?
I mean, I just wanted, I don't know, I can't see who asked the question. Like, my question would just be back, like, how does it land on your soil? Like, how does it land for you?
I guess for me, how given that it's it can be a bit discouraging because you're able to put yourself in their shoes, that when you want to effectuate change, it kind of makes it a little more difficult and a little more daunting. It's kind of like being able to see a future that could happen to you. And secondly, on the other aspect, it kind of also can be a kind of inspirational, because you also see that you aren't the only one that has felt this way, and those before you and perhaps those after you will feel a certain way. And even though the reality of what happened maybe 30 years ago is not the same as what has happened now, and you can see that there has been slight differences, there has been slight changes, and you can kind of pull two different aspects from the movie and from the general thing. That's how it lands for me personally.
No, I disagree with you, because you guys are in trouble more than us. Oh yeah, your generation, you're facing a much more sets of complex, historical circumstances. Ours was actually simple, because the digital world, and the world you are in, the closeness of the whole planet, you are in a much more complicated planet. The new Ethiopians, I'm not sure, they cross-dress in everything. They are in Paris in 1 second, sitting in one place at a cafe in Paris, in Ethiopia. They're both in Paris, in Cologne, and New York. In our time, this was space going. When we go to America, when you go to America, we were going to the moon. When I first came, I was going to the moon, and the distance is felt. Now, Ethiopians leave Ethiopia and arrive on an Ethiopian guy who pushes the wheelchair for them to get to their luggages, and it's a different planet. It's much more, subliminal, and much more shackly, prisony, if you understand what I'm saying. And do not underestimate it. I think we got away with murder better, and I'm saying, in my view, I think even now, an idea of country, ethnic politics, some of it is so hard for me to even comprehend why one kills a person for being Muslim or Christian or Oromo or this. I don't get it. But at least, even if we didn't see it, if it was there then, I prefer that world. Because I don't want the legacy of being hanged hanging an Ethiopian in an electric pole in Debre Zeit or something, the way it happens now. Or there's a sister who works here. Her father, they just came into their house, peasant father, and shot him in the forehead in Salale, Asalla or somewhere. So to me, I think that's why you guys have to be more deliberate, more critical of the one that passed us, but also critical of your own circumstances, okay? And not mellow it by ice cream leaking, in my view. That is the problem. And it could be worse if you guys don't notice it and macro amplify it with telescope. When you tell a story of this generation, you might as well be vigilant, because it's a complicated circumstances you guys are inheriting.
I agree. I feel like it can be a double-edged sword. I kind of agree and disagree with you in the way that, yes, we are facing a more difficult situation right now, but at the same time, I feel like things have gotten as worse, or at least a lot worse that they can be, and with the advent of social media and a lot of imagery, being able to see the world, we are faced in a unique condition where we're able to demystify the world and foreign countries as maybe people that our ancestors or our parents were not able to, because we used to put the Western world on a higher pedestal. And I feel like now, given with the context of everything, yes, it is much more difficult, but at the same time, we are able to there's this hunger that's a part of my generation, that even though we're the least known of our history, that absence, I feel like gives us this push to kind of get to a certain point that maybe we didn't have before. And with the capabilities that social media gives us, negative as they may be, also grants us the ability to effectuate greater change that we were not able to before. So I kind of have a point on that as well.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead, please. Right here. Oh, okay.
Yes, I just have a question about the dripping water. It gave me this sort of nagging feeling of that the dripping water, so I interpreted it as the persistence of the war. I interpreted it as violence also, because it's violent towards the young man. He cannot turn it off, and he cannot turn off the war either. But there seems to be much more to the dripping water than what I interpreted. What else is there to it? I know that there is a lot to that dripping water.
Well, I would say false modernization. We drive a car we never built. We have running water, but we can't even fix. So for me, it's false modernization. And it speaks about how I see, the fake high rises in Addis now. I'm not sure the water will travel that far to go do this thing I did for the future young filmmaker. It may not be easy to get driplets of anything, but the pipe will be there. You know, so I think it's, for me, the umbrella is false modernization. And you're right, the metaphor then goes next is that, you know, it's the clock, it's water, it's also the towel, you know, it's connected to many things, you're right. But fundamentally, it is false modernization.
Hi, Salam. Thank you so much. It's also an honor to meet the Cassandras and the testifiers of the world. I would like to say I think the story landed a bit differently for me, in the sense that it forced me to check my generational arrogance of thinking, oh, we will change it. Like, same thing. I came here, I was told, like, you're going to go to America for school, and it just seemed like that was the most rational and only option, really. And I remember having these exact conversations in college and being like, oh, they just don't understand democracy, or they just don't understand how to go about these things. And if we go back and we tell them and we show them, and I say that now, and it's been like 4 years after I graduated, and I'm fully entrenched in American life. And so, I don't know, I think for me, the story, it gave me a bit of hope to know that these conversations, these ideas are very circular and very cyclical, and we don't have to invent the wheel. We can definitely take parts from your story, see what works better for our time. Like you said, it is a very complex time. But yeah, I don't know. To me, this felt very, not to be on the nose, Sankofa of it, of like, you guys are telling us this is how it came to be and how it can come to be. But I don't know. To me, I just say, like, I appreciate the story you guys have told, the complexity of it. And even here, like, I don't know, like the being black anywhere, whether it's you are the majority of that country or nation, or if you're the minority, that identity conversation and trying to find the unity. I thought it was very, really cool how you underscored that point of unity at the cost of people's morals, lives, principles, and at the end of the day, what is that unity that we're fighting for? So I just want to say thank you for checking me and teaching me. So thank you.
I want to say something. Really, it's not accidental. From this film, I moved to make a film in the Black Lions. I don't know how many people saw the part we showed. Thank you, thank you. Like, well, you know, let me tell you now. You know, to me, I wish I knew that story when I was in the Ethiopian student movement. Then I would never have called my people backward. I would never have called my people feudal. I would have understood the complicated, you know, historical and social paradigm that Ethiopia was during the emperor. To me, we did not know. It's part of the elite of that period, the problem. To me, the fact we were not aware of what they came out of the Italian atrocity is still a mystery to me. How, if I didn't have my father, I would not have known, like many, when I showed the film in Germany, a lot of people came, Ethiopians were crying, saying, we didn't know this history. And in Italy, I showed it, the same thing happened. And to me, it's a story we have to know. It's a history we have to know. And the fact we didn't know that, I think we paid a great deal. We forgot human beings are complex. We thought human beings are just, you know, you shrivel them as you want. And I want to change them from their poverty, beating the shit out of them idea. Kind of all that arrogance was part of it. And for me, I wish this film was one film, the Black Lions was something we saw when we were in this Ethiopian students who were socially, politically concerned, genuinely, but would have given us a much more awareness as to the people we're talking about. Now, if you noticed under the tree, the guys who came to mobilize the Ethiopian peasants invoking Mao Zedong, etc. It came out straight from video shown to me by TPLF folks. Showed me a video of their success in the countryside. Some of it was in where I come from, and they were telling me how they were teaching the peasants. But when I saw their video, the peasants were making fun of them with syllogism, with the way they talk, with the twisted language. The kids did not know what they were saying to them. Like the guy who said, don't you agree that this government, that he says, with you, in other words, he says to him, you armed, asking me to question, you are armed and asking me this, and you have to know you're right. I have to say you're right. It was like, even the subtitle was not even added. It was shortchanged in the English subtitle, but he was saying like a snake, he says, I forgot it now how he says it. And the guy with the gun did not know what he said to him, the leaders of the guerrilla movement. So to me, even language-wise, we didn't know how to decode. In fact, one linguist guy, a PhD guy who was part of the EPRP, he said he's a PhD from UCLA in language. He said when he went to the Begamador area for the first time, his Amharic, he knew nothing about language. Because up to now, he's being taught language by Jewish white men on Ethiopian Amharic at UCLA, Jewish white scholars, French scholars. They have all this, studies. And Ethiopian studies is big in France and in America, and they were teaching them, these guys were teaching them about Amharic. In fact, one time I went to get a job, a student work studies. And the guy interviewing me was a Jewish guy, and he's interviewing me in Amharic. And I'm born in Gondar, grew up in Gondar, and the guy is like saying things, and I said, first, I said to him, you don't know Amharic. I said, you asking me to tell you and you're not even pronouncing it right. And and then I lost the job. But it's how I became aware of this whole monopoly of even teaching language. There's a French Jewish guy also who teaches, because in the Jewish community, Ethiopia is a very mysterious thing that they try to figure out, which is a very important legacy. But at the same time, their academic authority is very perverted at the same time.
Hello. This was I struggled to use the word beautiful, but that's the only word that's coming to mind. So for lack of a better word, this is a really beautiful film. Hearing what other folks have said, like about, is it a blueprint or is it a confession, right? You saying that it's a confession from your generation. It made me think of this quote from Ella Baker where she says, the struggle is eternal, the tribe increases, and someone else carries on. And I really feel like the end exemplified that when like the bell is ringing and they're back in the school, and it's like the war won't always be waged through warfare, right? It will be education. It will be the fact that we have to continue living, right? And the tribe will increase and we will continue. And unfortunately, it doesn't sound great. There will always be something to struggle against, but that doesn't mean that we're struggling alone or we don't have the ability to transcend it in some way, shape, or form. So ending on that note, it was really, really helpful for me. Sorry, it made me very emotional. That's why I was like, I'm really struggling with calling it beautiful, but like, it completely blew me away. In particular, I wanted to go back to the water metaphor because I was just really taken with how you use that to talk about trauma and how you exemplified like the persistence and like cost of war and the trauma that brings. And I was curious about what was it like for you directing those scenes, and like how did it feel to take a sort of a psychosocial like element of trauma, right? That's really hard to describe, and to describe that through film, through these really intensely like beautiful, evocative, for lack of a better word, evocative scenes, right, where this, you know, he's really struggling with this deep trauma in the moment where he says, like, you know, they didn't just kill that boy, they killed me, like they took my childhood. And so, yeah, I was just wondering what that experience was like for you to direct those scenes and to write those scenes. And then I also have a question for the actors when you finish answering my very lengthy question.
You know, hold it there. I would say this to you, you know, my trauma is racism. No one could understand how I could come from Gondar, Ethiopia, and I am entrenched in this issue because there are many unacceptable things that happened to me in suburban America, and it's very brutal. It's the first confrontation of the first confrontation of being taken as a subhuman, and not many Ethiopians get through that. For example, they do. Some high school friends of mine do not understand. Some of them came scholarship students. Some of them came by the Minister of Information, Ministry of Education, Ethiopia, etc. I came to go to school working. I was working gardening in suburbia Illinois every summer to pay my tuition, and the racism is my metaphor of the brutality you saw in the film. It's something for me I carry as a trauma because nothing was wrong with me until that. The most dangerous thing is how it can make you believe you're a reduced human entity. It's not many people experience that. And when I did gardening, I was brutalized by white women, suburban white women, who have their own oppression, but excel using foreign students like me who do gardening and digging and painting their summer furniture. So I would say that's the trauma of my departing point. It's a very serious confrontation I have with white supremacy. It was the first weapon that shook me, because I came confident. With my parents. That's why I identify my students at Howard. I knew they come from a confident Mississippi Delta family, and racism shakes the hell out of them when they're found isolated. And I can identify that when they experience it. I could see it. And the thing is, because of my own trauma on racism, and many people do not understand, because it's hidden in race discourse. Negro Americans, when I first came, it's called Negro Americans. And you hide, I'm Ethiopian. And when they reduce you to that you yourself are running away from, that's another thing that happens. So for me, there is a trauma that most people do not know of my own personal experience. But that is the trauma I use as a barometer for these other things as I go in. I would not have been sensitive to that Cameroonian black girl in Germany. And the black Germans, every time I go, they gather around me in Cologne and places, because I have this affinity to what they're going through without them telling me. Because I knew I was alone. Now these guys come at the airport, they hear I'm Herrick. Maybe the pilot, etc. When I came, there was no Amharic in 100,000 miles. There is no Ethiopian. And I'm alone. And it's different when you have an Ethiopian community already. You hide there, you're insulated. I was not. I came out straight, unprepared, no knowledge of racism, and I took white people as, angels. I was receiving some of the stuff, shook me. And so it's a thing I'm coming out of at that time, and now it's leveling off. But when I left Chicago, I was running away from racism, and then went into another form of intellectual environment of racism, because I tried to do a play by this guy, Amiri Baraka, the Dutchman, and it was the whole university went after me. making it illegal to do the play. So I don't want to go, going on and on, but that I want you to know, sister.
Yeah.
That is for me where I needed my sisters, my grandmother in Chicago. I wish they came. I dream a lot about them every night because I was confronting something that I didn't understand how to fight back. See, African Americans have tools, developed tools to fight back racism. As an Ethiopian, when I came, I have no tools in my kit to fight racism. I didn't even know how to identify it.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciated the ways that you just translated that to film, and then hearing you say more about like where you're pulling from, right? Because that is like, it's a hard experience to translate for folks who do not understand it. But then I also hear this like communal element that you're bringing in, right? Of like, even if we're not on the same landmass or we don't come from the same place, we can understand each other's experience in that way and meet each other in that way. So those scenes were very hard to watch, but I was just like really, really taken with the ways that you very deftly told that part of the story. So thank you for that in particular.
Let me add something. I did not, for example, when she did that scene, when she got up from that table, I was crying. So I was not even solid in my directing. Emotionally, in some scenes where they were purifying him with the tabal, it was so, for me, I was like not in my best shape of directing. I just was very, I was hiding emotionally. And I can tell you things like that. So for me, when Araba got up and did that scene, I wrote it, but when she did that scene, I'm crying. And when she came out of the bathroom, I'm crying.
Thank you so much for sharing so generously with me and with us. I really appreciate it. And for you two, I am very struck by the fact that y'all did this 18 years ago and you were so young, right? And so I'm wondering what you would say to your younger self, like seeing this 18 years later, right? Like what would you have told yourself about the impact that this would have? What would you have wanted to like tell your younger self about how this would transform you as you grew, things like that?
Okay. I from the time when Haile cast me, he told you the story. I was very conservative. Let me say a little bit about the generation I grew up in. We basically, we were the cannon fodder. Basically, after the revolution, we were the ones that were, grabbed from the street and sent to the battlefronts and everything like that. When I left Ethiopia, they took me off the plane. They already had my name and everything else. They already had my billets, where they were going to send me and everything. And I went into hiding for about, 3-4 weeks, so that the right people would get bribed and everything else, and I could get out of the country. Now, that means somebody else took my place. So I'm mindful of that. Okay, I'm mindful of that. So I grew up hating that generation, that revolutionary generation or whatever else. I grew up hating everything they stood for. And I came over here, and 18 years, we did the film and everything else like that, taught me a very important lesson. Walk in somebody else's shoes first before you actually think you understand what brought that about. Because as far as I was concerned, why did they do this? Couldn't they understand how great Ethiopia was? Because I had a father that was very, taught me Ethiopian history from A to Z. I had the books of Tedla Makurea. I had a lot of historical books that I read and read and read. And I was like, everybody had that access. So when I did this movie, when I learned, Haile is a great teacher. He doesn't let on, but he is a great patient teacher. I learned, I was very angry when I made this movie, and even before, and when I was talking to him, reacting to him, but I learned to walk in somebody else's shoes, and I learned a lot, and I learned that I could not be critical of something that as young people that they did, and that as a young person I was reacting to as well. So that's That's what I learned. If there had been at TEZA, I mean, he said something about if the Black Lions had been around as a youth movement, maybe they would have been more reflective, right? If there had been at TEZA, we would have been more reflective, and we would understand what brought that about. So that's what I learned, and I'll let.
I feel that I'm still learning. I'm still learning, and I think what I said also in the very beginning, what it has instilled in me is how our stories are intertwined, interconnected. This film, TEZA was also shown in Ghana, in Accra, and it was actually in the presence of my father. And I was very nervous how that would go, especially the scene, because my father did different circumstances, but he left Europe, But what the film has also, or the storytelling has also allowed me, because in another way I was also angry and I was very strict. Things have to be a certain way. It has to be a positive end, like Cassandra needs to keep her chill. So it just has really opened and taken away the fear of the complexity of our stories as well, And it has also opened the space for my anger in that scene, because I had this anger, but I was in a different role as well as organizer. And this was something I could not have allowed myself to voice out, but that doesn't mean that the anger wasn't there, but it was very locked up. So it was very, that's why it was challenging for me to, my father being confronted with that scene, how he would see that as well. But I'm all over the place because it's still cooking and it's still raw, what I'm saying. So, but it has really opened so many ways and also instilled the urgencies to tell our stories, in a way that doesn't have to be, like, it cannot be perfect with all its, with all its edges and however you can do it. So, yeah, thank you for the question, but I think I would still have to think of what I would like to tell my younger self. Maybe not to be that strict, it's not that, that's what I would say. But I was as organized. I was representing being the president. Just very strict. Very, very strict. But I'm also grateful that there was room for my strictness. There was room for my seriousness as well, and understanding, working with Gash Haile. So I'm also grateful for that there was room for that as well.
Thank you all so much.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. What an incredible film. I'm still processing. I just want to say thank you all for your craft back then and your candor tonight. Baby elder is going to be forever entrenched in my vocabulary. So thank you for that. Gosh, Haile, I mean, what an honor. My brother and I are actually children of a fellow Gondari childhood acquaintance, so I would love to talk to you about that later on. But what I took from the movie is there's a lot of dichotomy, there's a lot of duality, there's joy, there's pain, there's community, there's solitude, there's barbarism, there's empathy, and it's, there's a delicate balancing act throughout, but then at the end, you choose a lane, you choose hope, you choose light, you choose and if you were to make the movie today, not that I'm steering you to make a political commentary, but if you were to make the movie today, would you choose that lane? Would you choose the light? Would you choose
Well, I'll tell you one thing. This film is it. Every film for me is a staircase of my own evolution. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the kind of collaboration I was able to pull together to get this film out like this. I sat there watching it like I never made it myself. It's very hard for me to find where I glued it. You know, I edited this film for years, but now I don't even know my role in it as in terms of like how I put it together. Seriously, it's holding, it's in its own terms, its own historical moment where it came. So each film for me is a staircase, and it just pushes me to, you know, what I would want to do is to say to you, yeah, I have about 15 scripts I want to do before I leave this earth. I have a script called Yet Utilij, and that story is something I want to shoot. There's Chicken Bone Express I want to shoot in America, about the migration of South to DC, because I lived amongst the African Americans who migrated from North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, et cetera, et cetera. And out of that, where I lived, I have written a script called Chicken Bone Express, et cetera. So I have movies to make. So mine is, this one does, it holds its own ground. It's a film I'm really very proud of. I sat there today watching it like you were watching it. I was emotional, I was crying. And for me, this is how my films have been. Once they leave the cradle, you know, the bassinet, they sit like this, and I leave them there and use them as more learn. How much I learned as in the filmmaking craft is there, but the next movies have it. They've learned from my mistakes and errors, and so they are going to be meeting me in a very propelled space when I do the next one.
Haile. I wanted to ask you about, you said you don't remember how you constructed this film, but I wanted to ask you about the way in which you intuitively always add Sankofa into all of your storytelling. And as your choice to, as part of your process, to use the dream sequence is always very prominent in your films. And as you were talking about water as a signifier of ineffective modernization, I feel like, especially for all of us in the room and people who have claimed Pan-Africanism and who are struggling in terms of the dual identity, that what you really capture for us is that, in terms of going back to Gandhar, being there, you coming out of the tradition of storytelling, you coming out of the tradition of acting, your father, as you described, sitting around the fire, listening to elders telling stories, that as we are all trying, I hope, in some ways to save ourselves through memory work, I feel like your dream sequences are doing that for us in terms of making sure we don't forget the things that are important. You know, we may be driving cars and using electricity and things and what, but we cannot forget where we actually come from and what is the substance of our lives. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
It's such an honor to be here with all of you, and it's just such a really special screening to be with these actors and with you, Haile. I think what stayed with me after watching that was the complexity of hope. Personified it in one of your characters, particularly with children in the film. There's so many different iterations of how we see children and what they experience in the film. And so many of your characters are also having children themselves. And I was just curious about what having children, and from the actor's point of view as well, having children, also being around children and the power of children, and how that relates to hope and the complexity of hope, and what that meant to you as the filmmaker and then the actors.
Actually, let me start because this is kind of important. That was kind of what I was alluding to earlier. The first take, Haile, I was having a really hard time. If you saw the Gion Hotel scene where we go out on the balcony, and I'm looking out, and Marx and Lenin and what's the other guy are all they're in front of us, and I'm looking up and I'm looking down, and so Haile. I think it was like the third or fourth take, and Haile doesn't like taking too many takes, usually because he can get it in one or two, in one actually. So he was being very patient with me, and I think on the third take he came, and everybody was just very scared because I kept messing up the thing, and they said they weren't even looking at me. So Haile came, and I was scared about what he was going to say, and he said, Abiy, I'm here. I'm missing my daughter. You know how much I love my daughter. I mean, can I do this? How much I love my daughter. I'm missing her. Don't you have that kind of? And I just had a son. My son. And I was just, when he was telling me that, I just connected immediately to my boy, missing him and everything. It's like that. And I almost bawled my eyes out. So, yes. Children, having children, being with your child, that kind of came across, I guess, to me, and he was able to get something out of me, and I'm pretty sure it was also affecting him when he was making that film. But I just wanted to kind of touch on that.
Let me say something now, since it's getting going. By the way, what he's not telling you is, those Marx Engels in the town of in Addis at Mescal Square, the American embassy immediately ordered our government, Melis's government, to take it down. So when I'm shooting him, what makes me want him to kill him there is that poster is about to go down. They're down there to take it down because there's a military folks with guns wanting that whole poster to come down, because the American embassy has that power. The Marx and Engels poster, it's the poster is what the replica of what was there during the military junta. And so that tension was on me. We run there, we shot that he was in the car. We come back from the porch shooting, and I'm having a problem with it for the first time. Usually he's always on time. And he's right, I like to get one or two, economically speaking, I like to do one or two takes, three takes the most. After that is, the other part I want to tell you is I think, to me, filmmaking is a very corrupting planet because of it's spearheaded by a grotesque culture of stardom and attention seeking. 24 hours, look at me world. It creates that kind of, hedonistic planet. And I would say having kids saved me to be more human. Otherwise, the direction I was going, is a very, very a possibility of, because when you are socially committed, it's a road towards fascism also, because the world doesn't rearrange on your wishes also. But to me, my children civilized the hell out of me and made me human. That's one. And I'll tell you another one. When we were in Gorgora shooting the Gorgora part, every night where we are in the hotel at Gorgora, at 9 o'clock, electricity will go out and everybody has to be in their little cottages or dorms. And there was a sabotage on the film we don't know to this day, but we know the Ethiopian government has a hand in it. It's not video, it's film. And they made arrangement with the German producing groups and us, our line producer Pedro. They made an arrangement. The Ethiopian government required the film not to go. We finish shooting in Gorgora, and then it goes to Addis. It has to stay 24 hours in a storage the government prescribes for you. Instead of going to the Lufthansa to the lab in Germany. And they were exposing it. They were opening it and exposing it. And we were receiving a burnt film. And the third time or the second time it happened, I lost it. I was completely in isolation. And so what happened was, I contemplated bad things in life that Haile has never, I never thought about killing myself, for example. But every night before I go to bed with flashlight, I look at the photographs of my children. We have at that time, were they 6 then? I don't know, but 4 at least. And I'll take a picture, a flashlight, look at them, and that's my prayers to go to bed. And that day that I was confronted, I looked at them and I said, F the film, go home.
As well, I was particularly interested to hear your take as well, because your character actually decides not to have a child.
And I was really struggling with that as well. Like you say, in particular, how does it impact the move, or how?
Well, what I took from it was that it felt like children, and specifically also having children, was some sort of representation of hope. That maybe if certain things are not solved by this generation, it could be solved with the next one. And I just thought that your character's choice not to have the child, and I think represents so many different things, and I'm just curious what comes to mind.
As I was alluding to it, for me this was also a difficult place, because it has been such an important, even as an organizer, activist, I didn't have children, but I felt I'm doing this for the children to come, for my children to come. I see myself as an invisible mother, but for me it was hard to come to terms with Cassandra's decision because of how I viewed it, but then it allowed me also to make space for the complexities. But I was really, really struggling with that her decision, why she can't say, yes to the child. But then working on the film, it just also allowed, I remember, Haile, you said something that life is not always that, I can't remember how you put it, but you dropped something, like a seed that I had to really, go back with and see. It's not always that, I cannot remember what exactly it was. It was something like life is not always that, not like smooth, or it's not always, sometimes it's more complex, something like that. To also allow that decision of a mother, her decision.
Let me just say this, to add this. To me, I think in the way I write script or tell story, all my, all events are hijacked from individuals to a collective social context. It's always hijacked. No narrative is straight line except in Hollywood. No narrative, no story in the world, nobody's story is straight linear. It's complicated. And that's what makes life very, very, in my view, challenging. These complex navigations of things intercepted, intended to go somewhere, you're intercepted. And in Ashes and Embers, a guy wants to go audition as an actor. and wants to go in advance, a day in advance, to see the location, because black actors at that time so hungry, he wants to go the night before, see the location, to come back to do the audition. And when I constructed that scene, it's that's what they went to do, the two aspiring actors. But then the police intercepts, and it says black folks don't go to where they want to go. They are always intercepted. And I think life is that, in my view. Otherwise, I would have been in Ethiopia. I wouldn't be in America. I mean, this interception is what makes, the world complex and dramatic, in my view. And so I was saying in general, all the characters, they meet this intersection where it's not where they were going, but then the new intersection puts up a new bomb on them, and now they have to make meaning out of that, navigating that. And then again another one, and then again one. That to me is how drama is, in my view.
Hi. I almost feel like apologizing for not having any. Oh, yeah, sure. I almost feel apologetic for not having an Amharic greeting because I do not have any ties to Ethiopia in the background. Oh, salam. Well, I feel like that was given to me. This is something. This is not a background that I come from, but what I truly found this to be a comforting film in a strange way, because I felt so seen as an African American who increasingly, as I age, see myself as someone who is from nowhere but from everywhere at the same time, belonging everywhere. And seeing my background in really unexpected ways in the story, like my first memory is of sitting in my father's lap looking through a microscope. So I come up from a science background, and looking through pathology books and having the experience of being a sort of thwarted researcher myself, but also being the granddaughter of someone who was lynched. On my paternal side, my father grew up poor in a sharecropping family in Alabama. My grandfather was lynched. This was in the early '60s. My father, I didn't realize he tried to hide this from me, but had these horrific scars on his back and legs, and that was from multiple dogs attacks, from being a light-skinned boy that was assumed to be mulatto, but just some of the genetics of how we sometimes come out dark. He had 13 siblings, some who were so black they were blue, but just the universality of this struggle to escape violence and finding it. I don't want to. I feel weird about using the word loved, but I appreciated that he didn't lose his leg in the war. He lost it in this random act of racial violence. But going home doesn't save you from that violence either. I guess I just want to thank you for making something that made me feel so seen as a human being, which is something I think everyone across this diaspora feels as dehumanization. I think that's the one thing that we have in common. We may not share the same language, we may not come from the same country. I have had these really awkward experiences of being teaching English as a second language and having someone from Armenia or who really knows their culture, where they come from, and being curious about me, where are you from? And I have to say, I don't know. I know that my father sang me Cree lullabies. I don't think he knew there were Cree lullabies. I've been told that I have an Ethiopian face, and I know that's very unlikely. I'm most likely Yoruba, a mixture of, of European and Native American, so maybe that gets smushed together. That I first encountered this bookshop as a student here at Howard. Jean-Jacques Tati dragged me here for lunch, and really taught me about this principle of Sankofa, and that has just become something so important to me over the years, and something I really try to look for in art, regardless of where it comes from. I never find it in Hollywood, ever. But I do find it in Asia. I do find it in other marginalized populations. I just think that this was a really brilliant piece, and this is so clearly an Ethiopian story, and I learned so much about Ethiopia, but at the same time I felt like it was about me, my father, my grandfather, and just thank you. Thank you for that.
I wanted to actually touch on that. When we were in Italy, when the film was at the Venice Film Festival, and it showed, people came. I mean, one guy came to me and said, "This is our story," and I was like, "It's not an Italian story. How can it be your story?" And he was telling us that they went through the same thing as far as revolution is concerned, as far as that kind of violent kind of passage. When we were in Tunisia for the Carthage Film Festival, another person came to us. You remember the black Tunisian woman that came to us? And she said, we feel seen because you, Haile, brought us, you made this movie about us. And I was shocked, because I was we're experiencing the same thing, going different places with different people, and seeing this. So it's incredible. And I asked Haile, actually, when he was making the film, there was a conscious kind of pulling back on the story, making it a lot more universal than it was. And I was kind of maybe a little maybe naive, and saying, well, why doesn't it tell the story this way? Why doesn't it tell the story that way? And I realized in pulling it back a little bit, you're telling the story from a much more universal, much more human experience than it being, in Ethiopia and only happening to Ethiopians. Because a lot of people then could see that this is their common experience as well. So that's...
But I think that's a byproduct. It comes as a byproduct. I think, usually it would be wrong if the universal thing should be a logical consequence of its particular origin. To me, I think these are particular stories. You're right. I myself, the Tunisian sister you're talking about, she's a black woman who's not allowed to vote, to be part of anything. And in Tunisia, more racist stuff is going on her, and she always cried when we saw her, etc. So it spoke to her. But to me, I think these are particular stories, we get on this universal level. But then I know an Ethiopian guy who has left a son and went to the movement in Germany, I was in his car, and does not acknowledge the son. And so, to me, that's particular to me, because it's an Ethiopian father. I have my own friend in Germany who does not, I say to him, can we visit your child? He would not be interested in in seeing his own son. So it's a particular contradiction of Ethiopians in this immigrated planet. But then it has its universal application, because I concentrated more on that. So to me, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, often they would say to you in Hollywood to make you buy it, they would say to you, oh, love is universal. It's not universal. It's particular. Its universality is a byproduct, because all human beings have a complex way of dealing with all the things we know about human emotions. And so the idea that we all bleed, no, we some of us bleed shit, some of us bleed vitamins, overfed by vitamins and medicine and etc. So for me, all human beings have a particular departing point. That melody is important. And the universality comes, trusting it will come, is I think what gets it. So for me, all my films, I depart from a core particular. And then the universal amazes me myself when people snatch my film from me and take it and say, this is my story, you know. I remember a woman who walked to Howard, my office, and she came, a graceful sister came into my office and she said, this is my story. This is everywhere Shola walked in the earth, I saw my footstep there. You know, you can say she's crazy. No, she's not. For me, I know what she's connecting to, because there's also this thing that is usually discouraged. One way of the African American survival kit is genomic memory, but it's the most discouraged aspect of, no one wanted to wonder, although in black literature and in art you could see it, but there's this memory that folks don't know how to locate it, they feel it. They feel lash, they feel violence, they feel laceration. We don't know it if we come from another society. So to me, I start paying attention to this memory of African Americans, like a crazy person who nobody believes walking on earth with this burden of remembering, because nothing dies. It just mushrooms into. I always told my students at Howard, I said to them, do you want to know how the woman, at a certain time she's being hanged, she's being flogged? You know where her scream is? I'll tell them. It's in space traveling, and sound travels, and it's capturable. If you travel faster than sound, you can catch the scream somewhere in the galaxies. In other words, if black people were in charge of America, this astronaut jackasses would have been recording the memory of black people, instead of talking shit about the memory of this arrogant fraternity white boys club in this new space travel. Every time they travel, they invoke something else. But for me, a black kid could travel in the speed of light and catch the scream of his or her own ancestors. It's not dead. It doesn't die. But also, I think genomic memory also exists. That's why black poetry, black music, jazz invokes it all the time, but it's not believed. Now it is, I think, there's a lot of studies on genomic memory. But it's, to me, I think rupturous violence is always remembered genomically for generations. Yeah. But when you have no power to determine, to imagine the past memory with new technology, it's not amplified. So for me, this is something serious that is part of the literature. And as Sandy was talking about, in terms of, to me, dream is my way of going to the galaxies, because that's when literature could be so free. So free. Dream is free, And this, this is a guy who comes back mutilated, and in his dream, Gotara, I know some of you folks from this, you don't know, the silo for food preserving grains is where he sleeps. His grains are sitting there in circular. Those are what we call gotara, and the gotara in his dream comes, busting, opening, and teff coming out of it, and he's trying to plug it with all his education, tearing his books, trying to plug his to salvage the teff, but it doesn't work. And then the old man said to him, maybe you're dreaming about something that your education, your country's problem is so enormous. Teff is the metaphor of teff is the people of Ethiopia. And it's not countable. You can count other grains, not teff. And so it's saying it's the problem of your people that's overwhelming you. So for me, that literature comes from dream. And some of it could be a dream for myself, dream I would have, maybe I had or something. I could borrow it to a given script, etc. But these are like important nuances. In Ethiopia, every morning you get up, in my kind of planet, my mother and her neighbors are sitting around with coffee and talking about dreams every morning. And boys are not allowed, or we're not, it's a girls' thing. My sisters are always sitting and having this, and I'm overhearing. So this is how I've stolen. Even sometimes my sisters would say to me, we didn't know you were paying attention. How did you get it? To a point, I can replicate my mother's cooking by smell only, because boys are not allowed to go to the kitchen. But by smell alone, I could recreate my mother's food. And when I recreated some sauce I make, she was surprised how I did it. Again, by smell memory, And so it's a lot of literature in our country is underestimated because we don't harvest from it, because it's halakar, backward, The tabal thing, this is my challenge with the tabal. Is it backward? And then I said, I'm not sure. So if I'm not sure, I use it to open his brain, to open his memory. At least it served that to make him. That's the first time you see Colon is when the tabal worked on him. I said, okay, I may not believe it works, but it opened his clogged memory. I'm just talking shit without being asked, sorry. But I hope it's related to some of what was said.
Yes.
I had a question about like the technical aspect of the film, and thank you so much for everything you've given to the diaspora. I was wondering, when you were thinking about sound, this film was very rich in sound, and I noticed you use it as transition. What were you imagining during or in post? What kind of emotion were you trying to evoke with the sound? And also, are you very particular about your vision when you're creating, or is it more of like a collaborative thing when you're making films?
Well, I would say this to you. I think first, let me just acknowledge there's this Ethiopian giant saxophonist guy, Jorga. He is a phenomenal. So his music is collaboratively very important to me in terms of music. But sound is for me, it's part of the, you are very custodian. Every sound you heard from your childhood, your environment, the world you grew up, is all logged in your consciousness. It invokes emotions. So for me, for example, thunder and lightning is very serious where I grew up. And it comes throughout my films here and there. Sound is very important to me because I think our country is sound. That's one thing, especially when I was growing up, there was no movies. Sound was our, whatever it makes us imagine is the sound we hear. And the sound at that time is not polluted or overloaded by technological soundtrack. It's birds, tree, wind, things like that, rain. Rain is a lot. When I hear a roof, a rain falling on a roof, is like, for me, it's like memory busts out. So I go through my childhood a lot, And so sound is very critical for me. The new film, Black Lions, I was so fortunate. My son is now into sound also. He made a film and he helped me. But often I make my own sound working hard day and night. And I design the sounds. And it's inspired, called for sometimes by the image itself calling certain sounds, sometimes accidentally coming across sound that I said, oh, goodness, this would work. And other times it is searching. When you're researching for sound, again, you stumble in the sound archive, the library, sound library, you find certain things and you do that. So basically and the other one is really, my grandmother is a soundtrack. Around the Fire, she's a soundtrack. The Crackling Fire is a soundtrack that accompanies her, okay? So for me, this is what I grew up. I'm a generation, unlike this guy, for example, I didn't grow up under electricity. The initial coming into the world is around the fire. My grandmother poking the fire and talking stuff that bothered her all day, And so these are like rich vocabularies in sound, in mood, in sensations, in the different sound sensories, sensories that could also be translated into the psychology of sound, which I learned more now, their effect, what they could invoke. These are like things I work from, but often it's an imperfect journey. You do this, you do that. Just today, I had to change for the new film a sound that bothered me, but I never had answer for it. I watched it with people in DC. I watched it in Germany twice, in big screen. Why is it bothering? This is bothering me. And it was 2 days ago, I locked in. I said, God damn, that's the sound that goes here. And so now I'm going to make the guy redo that part of the sound.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, young people.
First, I just want to say this is less than a question and more of like an appreciation. And the first time I watched this movie, I think I was like 13, 14, and it made me really realize, it made me appreciate my father more, because when he told me about his childhood, when he told me about, he was, born in the empire, but then the revolution came real after, and I could not understand it because I was not born in that space. I was born in a very much revolution, post-war kind of era. So I just thought peace was like a normal thing for me personally, and the movie really made me appreciate how much, what he went through and how much, he still held that and still was able to give me. And this movie really captured it, really captured the layers of, the empire and the struggle of the revolution and the current modern Ethiopia. And the really interesting part, I think, is when you talked about history, and I'm a history major right now, and the first time I was actually exposed to history was not in any kind of it was not in school or anything. It was in a monastery in Addis Ababa, where the monks used to tell me, the historical, the history of the church and the history of the empire and stuff like that. And the interesting, what was that? I think my little question would be, how should we approach when we tell African history? Because the really shocking part about African history is that when I came to this country and when I was attending college, the professor just told me that, when he was talking about African history, especially, he was mostly like, we don't know much about African history, so we're just gonna take like 2 weeks from it, and then we're just gonna jump to Europe and Roman, the Roman Empire and stuff like that. And the really shocking part about it was because I know more about Ethiopian history and African history more than these people, and it really shocked me. So how should we approach when we tell African history, when we discover African history for the future, I think?
Well, first let me tell you, you're really exciting me, because when the film came out, a lot of young people in Addis, a lot of young people in Toronto, a lot of people in Los Angeles, New York, young people like you, they just came and say, for the first time, I now know my father. Yeah. That's the best compliment. To me, I think to understand that generation is very important. That's the first step in my view, especially in the family, because not many Ethiopians are actually, cultivated. My father never spoke nothing to children. He would look in another direction to ask you something. He doesn't even see you straight. He doesn't share nothing with you. And I loved my father. I'm not complaining. I'm just telling you, I had this kind of father. And then when I had kids, I say, I don't want to be like my father, although I want his integrity still to kick in. Okay? But the important thing is, without judging, to understand where they come from and know them, because they will never let you really know more, because that's not how we are cultivated. That's one. The other part of it is history. To me, history is, especially Ethiopia, is a very complex country. Ethiopia, no joke. It's when I started doing this Black Lions, I realized this is a country I can't take for granted. Ethiopians, this barefoot Ethiopians, their brain is in the galaxies, moving and rearranging Plato's nightmare, okay? So to me, it's very important to understand that this barefoot Ethiopians' history is very hard. It's not easy to know in one sitting, but you have to bite at it like an apple. It's in bite you take, not automatic. I think when Europeans or Ethiopians think we know our history, for me it made me humble, and that I don't know more. I learned so much with this Black Lion film, but I realized how much I don't know the Ethiopians, how much I don't know my father, how much I didn't know how he thought. For me, it's like our debate when I even asked them, after I grew up, I asked them, is Adwa for real? You guys defeat Italians? How can you defeat white people? It's not in my orientation. And he said, well, you could never understand it. Because he knew me. In my generation, he says, you could never understand it. What would I tell you? Because he said, it's like a person who doesn't know a bullet kills. He says, if he doesn't know a bullet kills, he doesn't die immediately, he said. But when you know a bullet kills, immediately when you hear the sound, you're dead, he said. So he said, what you don't know? He was trying to teach me about the Adwa people. They were shot, bullets is hitting them. They thought it was a flea bite as they were going with their swords, cutting heads, Italian heads, and heads after heads. And they would say they would get drunk with their own blood that is coming out of them and finally collapse. It was not easy to understand this whole stuff. My father told me, says, they would be like with their sword, he'd say, what a flea. And they would just push that thing that bit them. They would snatch it like this as if, but it's a bullet that hit them. And I'm saying, why didn't they die immediately? He said, because they don't think bullet kills them, or this gun that came and hit them is a flea that bit them. That's a different consciousness. He said, you are molded by this British schools. He's right. And so for me, one, I think African history is a serious, untouched history. We have not yet spoken. We have not yet told our stories. That's why it saddens me when we don't really spend time researching, writing about our own stories. We're busy imitating the imitators of history. And that's the tragedy, and mainly a tragedy of the new generation, in my view. As far as I'm concerned, I think so much untouched stories just fly all over. The minute you go somewhere, you know, my uncle, I'll go sit with him when I go from America. It's like a university session to hear him talk. But if you didn't have the respect that he knows what he's saying, what he's talking about, it doesn't make sense. And I think that's why my generation, they thought they're going to teach Ethiopians change, as if they never had a change. Ethiopian contextual change had been occurring for a long time. And it does have Ethiopian psyche in it. All changes in Ethiopia, except the one we tried, has Ethiopian psyche in it. Even the Emperor Haile Selassie changed, because he came out of change, came out of the Ethiopian psyche. It had Ethiopian logic. The power struggle that took place is very Ethiopian. And we attribute it to the British royal family intrigue. Ethiopians had a deeper space age royal intrigue in the palace. And this is what we didn't know as a generation. We didn't know the sophistication of that historical transaction. We thought it is just something you do, like even the Russian Revolution was not how we thought. Because there's a new book out now. A lot of my friends, they're reading it. It's called the House of Government. A Russian guy wrote it. It's a big book. When you see it, it discourages you. But I read it twice because it speaks about my generation not knowing Russians. We talked about Russian Revolution, and we're doing Russian Revolution like the Bolsheviks, the Mensheviks. They were the sophisticated creatures. The Russians in music, we didn't know Ethiopian music. They knew European music. Russians not only know Russian music, these revolutionaries, they knew European music. They knew Mozart, Beethoven. Ethiopians, that's bourgeois for Ethiopian Marxists to think about music being something serious. Culture, okay? It's all very, very dogmatic, mechanical, and imitative. Has no cultural idea in it. And so we paid for it. I think this is what other generations could learn from us. You can't take your people simple. There's more depth to them. And I think that would make you just have a break. And otherwise, change is always inevitable. Like the emperor said in the film, change always comes. If it's good for the country, so be it. I mean, that speech made me respect him so much. Okay, I have a lot of problem with that period of his government. But that speech is so visionary. It says, if change is good for the country, so be it. Removing me it's another, there's no more to talk, he says. To me, that at that age especially, that's not he was old, but he was sharp. He says, you kids think you're changing? We know change too, but if it's good for the country, so be it. And I thought that was like the most powerful literature. For me, I don't know how other people see it, for me. Okay? And I've began to see the emperor differently. Just trying to do TEZA, going over researches, etc. I said, oh, there's something more to here. And one time I interviewed a guy. Unfortunately, it's his historian, Tedla Mokria. Tedla Mokria is a royal family historian, but is not really a royal family historian. He's not a critical historian. He quantified taking stuff from Italians, French, which is Ethiopian, and he even thinks Italians know Ethiopian history better than Ethiopians. And I had a problem with him. So when I interviewed his historian, he said to me, I said to him, what do you think about African history? And Africans, and then Adwa, what does it mean to Africans? He said, well, let me give you a good example. When I was shooting him, at the mantle of his fireplace is the emperor, a picture of himself with the emperor. And I have composed him like that. Because that's what he thinks he's a historian of. And I'm composing. And he said, I said to him, that question, and he said, let me tell you a story. He said, the emperor called me one time. He called me back on the phone and he said, Senghor is coming to our country. He's a literature man. He's a pencil man, a pen man. And I want you to be his to introduce the country. What do you call those? A person who guides you. He said, since you are also guide. No, it's not guide. There's a liaison, but there's another word I'm looking for. But it's like, you know your country, you are from literature also, you write history, this guy is an intellectual. I want you, out of all the African leaders coming for the OAU conference, he singled him out to take care of that guy. And then he says to me, Your Majesty, how can I take around a nigger in my own birthplace? What would people think of me? And I left that house, you know, in film we call it rack focus. The emperor was just magnified. I said, he called him, and when I realized how Pan-Africanist the emperor was, and this guy was so dwarf and supposed to be our historian, I just left the house saying, damn. One simple incident, and then rack focus to the picture in the background of the emperor said, he was ahead of his people, his own intellectuals, his own historians, etc. And your historian was how I wouldn't have said the shit about him if you didn't say he's your historian. Thank you so much. Abiy said he read him a lot. His father had his books, all the 20, 30, 100 books. He's written about 1,000 books. Thank you for coming, everybody.